In your own Olympiad of novelists, living and dead, who are the ones that inspire you, challenge you, threaten you?
Well, I'm only interested in what I can admire, and there are a great many writers. I mean, if you wouldn't seriously want to know all the writers I admire, the list would go on for hours.
I want to know the ones you light candles to, you know.
I don't light candles to anyone. I reread the writers I admire all the time. And I hesitate only because it's a chance to pay tribute to writers, and there are so many.
What's up? To my girls, gays, and days, how's it going? It's your boy Nate. I read books because reading is sexy. And if you're not reading, you're not sexy. Y'all. Ooh, get out of the way. Y'all, thank you for 5K. As a thank you, I put up 2 polls asking what I should do. Do I put out another vlog, another Q&A, or my favorite books of all time? Here we are. Here we have it. This is my favorite books of all time. And honestly, y'all, I've been dreading this. I hate talking about my favorite books. I can't, because they're so personal to me, and they're mine. They're mine. Nobody else can have them, okay? You might love it too, but they're mine. Nobody else's but mine. They've just hit really close to home, created a swell of emotions in me. I regard them as something I don't ever want to talk about, because also I have my own literary canon, 52 books. That's a book a week to get to know me. I'll have it downstairs. It's on Goodreads. 52 books that have made some impact on me, or large impression on me in terms of craft or emotion, or just connected so deeply to my own life. And I've collected about 7 or so books. I'm here to talk to you about them, but not in the fashion that is conventional. Pato recently put out this fantastic video called Memories I Associate with Specific Books, and that's how I connect to books, really. They inform my life, and when that happens, my life also informs the book. And because of this close reading, I have this closer reading to the text, and that's why some of these books mean so much to me, because it's the fiction speaking to my own reality that I think just makes me who I am. So, without further ado, let's get into this. All right. Ugh, kind of nervous. Ugh. Okay. If Joan Didion wasn't my first, it would be Lydia Davis. And I usually don't enjoy collected stories, but I have the collected stories by Lydia Davis. Ooh, what's the rule? I can't talk about what the book's about. I have to only talk about my personal experience. While I was trying to understand and getting aggravated about wanting to be a writer and learning the craft itself, running through Joan Didion sentences, copying them over, I got really frustrated because I couldn't get into the rhythm. And because of that frustration, I felt so much like a failure. And it's that sort of 20-something adolescence kind of frustration where you feel like a failure, like there's dead ends and you can't really get it right. And then so I looked to other writers, and I remember going into dog-eared books in San Francisco, and I saw this peach-colored book. I skimmed through some of the stories, seeing that some were a single sentence, some were a paragraph, some were 12 to 22 pages, and I was just like, huh? How do you make a short story out of a single sentence? And it was through her that I realized that I saw a sentence more as song, and when I did that, going from Lydia Davis to Didion, I realized, oh, okay, great, this is how I score. And you can score through paragraphs, or you can score through a single sentence. And it was Lydia Davis who really taught me the music, the lyricism of a sentence, where to hold back and where to really push it through. I remember in my early days as a creative writing major, I read through at least half of it, and then I was getting so scared that to finish it would mean never to read more of her work. But she has a shit ton of more work. Yeah, I read it in my first year as a creative writing major. It sung out to me. It made me feel less like a failure. And don't you love it when a woman does that to you? Oh, boy. All right. Well, there's that. Next book is which I have a physical copy of. I'm afraid I don't have physical copies of my favorite books. They're all back home at my LA address. But here I have Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Vuong. This hit me really hard after I came back from France and came back to San Francisco and really had an identity crisis because I also had to take an Asian American history class, and that just spiraled me into like, oh my god, am I Vietnamese American or American Vietnamese? Why can't I speak my mother tongue so well? Why can't I speak to my family members? Why can't I connect to them emotionally? Why have I detached myself so far from them? Why do I just suck at being Vietnamese? But then also, why the hell do I suck at being American? Am I even American? Why did I leave America? Here I am abroad in Asia, like, what? You know? But this just sung to me in a way where I felt so proud to be Vietnamese, and I had never been one to be proud of my own ethnicity. You know, I was always that banana, if you will, and was never happy about being Vietnamese until I read this. I realized how sorrowful and beautiful the Vietnamese language is. It also works as music. It doesn't sound like music sometimes, but when sung or when a story is relayed, there is an ultimate beauty to it and an ultimate weight carried with certain words, like Vuong, which means sad, but you can hear it in the belly of the word. And I realized how spatial the words were. And Ocean plays with it because there are poems in here that combine English and Vietnamese. And I was one of those kids that did combine both languages into poems and, you know, had gone to workshops and people tell me, what does this mean? What is that? Like, why did you include this? Why didn't you just write the entire thing in Vietnamese? This was still before the time of, like, representation. This is pre-Crazy Rich Asian days. And everything, everywhere, all at once, and you have so much representation now. Yeah, it was hard to find my own people, my own voice in terms of heritage. Deeply resonated with me, and sometimes helps me with my own writing. I am so focused on the song of literature that I forget how much more musical it can be when you break some of the words. And in some of these poems, you really see the destruction of the American language, mostly perhaps out of spite that Vietnam as a land has been destroyed by America. And so it almost feels in kind of like an adolescent, angry kind of way, this play on language, but done with a sense of humor. Vietnam has always known war. Humor is a really strong thing to have, just to levy out everything out of life. And so, you know, all my great aunts and uncles have a great sense of humor, and for good reason. And you see that. The language is playful when Ocean approaches both Vietnamese and English. Though sometimes he's too serious in Vietnamese, I think because we want to convey that always first, the very stature of our emotions in our mother tongue. Resonates deeply with me, more so than, dare I say, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. I love that book too, and I believe that is in my canon, but this, before anything else, hits home entirely. And, oh God, I'm gonna cry. Just thinking about some of this and how it really shaped some of my early work on identity, which would be very hard to find, but 14 Hills, SF State, my alma mater, if you ever try to find it. Woo! Okay, no, I'm not gonna cry. I told myself I'm not gonna cry. All right, let's keep going here. Okay, next up is Ask the Dust by John Fante. You know, we get female writers like Eve Babbitt's and Joan Didion writing about LA, but we forget about the men. And, you know, for good reason, because Charlie Bukowski wrote about LA and not the greatest kind of guy. But we always forget that someone inspired Charles Bukowski to write, and it was John Fante, who wrote about LA in that same kind of Eve Babbitt's elegance, but sort of through the unsung hero. I didn't know what it meant to be macho in my upbringing, but if there was anyone who did teach me how to be macho in the sort of loser writer kind of way, it was John Fante. He also taught me the sort of lyricism in writing that actually led me to Joan Didion. I think I had found his books in a used bookstore somewhere in San Diego, and I wanted to read about home, but from sort of like, you know, me, a male voice. And though quite hetero as it is, I just really wanted a father figure in my life, you know? I thought it was Hemingway, maybe Fitzgerald, then it became like Hunter S. Thompson and Kerouac and all of that, but it was always John Fante that sort of, you know, I hope that makes sense. But it painted home in a very beautiful light, in that sort of moonlight serenade kind of way, and made me appreciate home when I didn't. Made me realize how beautiful downtown can be, and you see bits of old LA in downtown through his work. I think that's why his work has always meant a great deal to me. The great old Bandini stories. He reminds me of the Santa Ana winds at night, the light breezes carried from the beach, or carried from the great American spirit. Okay. Up next I have Dictee by Theresa Kyung. This I found by way of mention in another book in my canon list, Minor Feelings. Cathy Park has this incredible essay about Theresa Kyung. That's a life that I think about from time to time. She was an artist, multimedia, but also a writer, and this entire book is beyond literature. It's at times unreadable because there are scrawls in French, Korean, English, her own handwriting. It is just a tapestry of our approach to memory, language, time. Ooh, and I'm doing that thing where I'm not supposed to talk about what the book is about, but the very content of the book and its unreadability and its attempts to try and convey history in this almost bodily form, like corporal bodily form, flesh and bones, I think is what I'm always trying to do when I write, and how I see myself as a person. Like, how do I flesh out my body in my native tongue to you, that I'm not just myself, but I'm also the generations of my own family and those echoes of so much violence and hurt. God, why is this so serious? See, this is the thing. I can't talk about my favorite books. It's so difficult because they mean so deeply to me. Anyway, Cathy Park has this incredible essay about Theresa, who was murdered. And so Dictee, I believe, if I remember correctly, was published posthumously. And it's incredibly sad because this is her only work. She's lived quite a life trying to piece together her own life, her own history, her family history. And I think there's one, like, media piece that she did. And then she was murdered in New York, and then her life was gone. When I picked this up and see how she had tried to survive violence, not just from her family history, but the everyday living, the violences in everyday living, trying to cope with that, trying to make herself feel safe, creating this very thickly woven tapestry as shield or like chain metal mesh to protect herself, to create the armor of herself. I need to give this book a reread at some point, but because it's the kind of book where every time you approach it, new meanings arise. New meanings arise in Korean, French, and English. All languages that I have not the greatest grip on, but enough to see and try to understand where I might come from when I approach language. And it's a really fun study on like linguistic choices and which words come faster and why. If either between Korean or English or French and English, if you're experiencing some kind of like issue in duality and trying to convey meaning to a person. If anyone ever grew up with like 2 languages in the household. Yeah, I don't recommend it because it's a lot. It's a really tough book to get into, to finish, and question marks will always cross your face on every single page because you're like, what is she saying here? What does this mean? There's immense joy in that, in the challenge of trying to understand someone. Is that joyful? I don't know, but I love that. I always love a work that challenges me. I don't usually read for comfort. I read to escape, and in a sense, I guess that is comfort, but I ultimately read to challenge myself to just like see different narratives, see different stories, voices, hear them out. Yeah, this is one of those challenging reads. Okay, y'all know big sip, moment of silence, because we are a Lispector stan. Sophie and I, we just had a chat today about the Besieged city, which I had quite an emotional wreckage with. But, both Sophie and I have chats about Lispector on her channel. Go check it out. I'll have it linked somewhere. But this was my first Lispector, and I was in a writing class, I forget which one. My TA and my professor both had this, and they were reading it and just like chatting it up because it was their first Lispector and they had just picked it up, and they were just talking about it. And I was just like, what is this book? And they were like, y'all, have you read Clarice Lispector? It's a jam. We're jamming out. And none of us, of course, young 20-somethings at like an evening class, so tired out of our minds, like, what are they on about? Like, what is this book? I was just like, okay. And I jotted it down in my notebook, and it wasn't until I went to The Green Apple that I flipped through it and was astonished. Something broke inside of me, and I didn't know how to cope with the world at large, because I feel like someone had come into my head and seen everything and fleshed it out into the greatest existential piece of work there is. It is really this like micro sense in which he writes that breaks all conventions of the reality of our world, and how in order to understand the inner intimacies of our head space and of memory and time, I think I realized like the novel didn't have to be in like a Kurt Vonnegut arc kind of way, that it could be so broken that it is just a pool of time, memory, and attempts of understanding, attempts at the great love that exists so inherently inside of us, pulled out just because a cockroach died. Somewhere in my early 20s, I felt really lost, I think as any 20-something-year-old does. It wasn't until I picked this up that I felt even more lost. But I felt understood. And I think when you feel understood while you're lost, it's helpful in some kind of way. After this, I really wanted to go to every single Lispector there was, but I knew I had to take my time because something had broken so much in me that made me leap out and reach life in a way. I think, oh God, I'm 30 now. And so when I look back at time, reading Lispector really shifted and exploded my approach to the world. I felt more free-form and flexible, moved very comfortably around people, time, work, school, in a way that really heavily lustful for life, and it made life more lush. And yeah, Lispector did that all to me. Not you, maybe, but mostly to me. And that's why it's in my favorite books of all time, because yeah, she really changed something in me. Next up I have Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. I remember when this came out, it was a big deal because it dealt with 9/11. Yeah, I had always wanted to get to it. Saw it at Target, picked it up, and was just blown away. I read it somewhere in my teens. You know, it's tough growing in the suburbs, trying to reach places of culture. I think I picked this up when I was like, 15, 16. I didn't know how to drive yet. I didn't even have my permit. Yeah, it was hard to get to places, hard to get to concerts, having to rely on friends, on parents to take you places. Yeah, I had picked up a bunch of books from Target. It was like the only place that I knew where to get books from. And sure, I went to the library too, just like the selection wasn't great ever. And I'm pretty sure it's the same now. And so it was tough, you know. The internet wasn't fully formed yet. I was pirating art house films, and it took so long to get like the finished product on my end in order to watch it. You know, LimeWire, Pirate Bay, anybody else? Vuong. And yeah, it was really hard to watch movies. But I had this book by Jonathan, and I was spellbounded, and I had just experienced a great loss in my life that it just hit home. And it was written in a way that not only obstructed the story and plot, but it literally destroyed the book. There's a portion in Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close where, you know, the words fall off the page. They crunch up and bunch up at the end, and everything blurs, and there's just this beautiful combination of how sometimes you can't convey everything in words. And though that is always something I'm trying to attempt to do in my own writing, here, you had literal words just like falling off the page. And I'd never seen it done that way. And sure, I was aware of like books like House of Leaves, where you had to like turn the book to read it. But this really showed me that different ways of reading can destroy language. And seeing language destroyed in this way just made me realize the beauty one seeks out in trying to convey things in word, and how sometimes it fails, but sometimes that failure is beauty. Failing to understand sometimes leads you to beautiful places, and then maybe you come around, maybe you see something different and it takes you on a different path, and the paths change. And it brought me away from those grief-stricken years in my life and gave me hope, I guess. And it's the hope in failure that is hard to see when you're a teen. And so when I saw it, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to be okay. That I can finish high school, that, I didn't have to try and harm myself in certain ways, and really go on trying to live. Meant a great deal to me. And I think I'm, due for a reread of it to see how well it holds up. And I'm never ever gonna watch the film. Sorry, I know Tom Hanks is in it, but I just know that, like, I know Hollywood's destruction of the book for me will not put the movie in good taste for me. I know. So is that everything I wanted to say? And I didn't talk about the book. We're doing pretty good at this. All right, last book is Evening in Paradise by Lucia Berlin. I love Lucia Berlin, and I feel like she's so heavily underread, but that's okay, because she's my gal. She's my gal, nobody else's. You don't have to pick her up. I think what everyone picks up is a manual for cleaning women. My only issue with that is that it just literally contains all of her stories, but I don't think her stories work in that way. They have to be curated in a specific way. So Long Stories is a specific time period that's collected. It's also good. That's actually on my shelf, and I really love that collection. But I feel like the best curated compilation of stories is Evening in Paradise, which, oh my god, I'm talking about the book. No, I can't. Anyway, this is my favorite book because Lucia Berlin is one of my favorite writers. Here you have a woman who has always struggled with alcoholism and who is working 3 jobs, living in Oakland while raising 3 to 4 boys at the same time. I feel like there has always been a strong privilege to the writing life. Sure, you can look at the beatniks and not think so too much, but there was always a sense of privilege that you had to have in order to become a writer, because you needed time to write. And sometimes that time is really hard to find. But then I think about people like Toni Morrison, and I'm just like, how the hell did she do it also? And so Lucia Berlin has always been that person where I was just like, you know what? I can do it. I can have the time to write. Having gone through school full time and working 2 jobs, I was just like, why am I in school for something that I can't even do because I don't have time to do it? And I think Berlin, in all of her stories, she writes herself in it. And in those stories, she tries to write out her alcoholism, finding the little beauties in everything. And they're very short, simple, beautiful stories about yearning, about the loves of your life, about the oddball characters in your neighborhood. And it's just so full of charm, so full of that quiet beauty that you find at, say, a laundromat or sitting at a cafe for too long. There's just something so special about her view of the world that makes you step back and really think, you know what, maybe I should take it slow, maybe, all this shit is happening, but I do have time, at least a few seconds or so, to really take everything in and appreciate that health is wealth, I'm okay, I can go on living. I think that's the beauty of Berlin. Just her as like a unsung hero kind of way. There's always this underdog quality to her stories. It's always just the push to just be like, you know what, pick up the pencil, pick up the pen, go to the blank Word doc and just go at it. Just do it, which I should be doing now, honestly. But I came across Berlin through a creative writing course, and it was Manual for Cleaning Women. I didn't respect it at the time, and I feel so much shame around that because it was collected in this like big chunker, and I was just like, stories can't be collected like this. They need to be curated. And so when I was looking at the curated collections, did I realize the magic of Berlin. There's much a sweeter, warmer quality to her work in contrast to, say, Didion. I think she has an Didion-esque sense to the way she edits her sentences, but a Lucia Berlin sentence sings because there's a warmth to it. There's almost this like maternal quality that carries the rush of her stories. Yeah, this one means a great deal to me because they're wonderful stories. And there's even one that's a paragraph long. It's just so eclectic. It's called The Pony Bar in Oakland. It's so frenetic, strange. You get sort of these clanks and clutters. It's the music of like a dive bar, and the very character of it. You realize how much place means so much to her, and the feeling of place. Having bipped and bopped around all over the world, I think about certain bars, certain restaurants, certain cafes from so far away, and I remember, you know, the smells, the light, everything about those places and how they carry memory. So aware of it that they become real, like right next to me. Has this been entertaining to you? Because I just feel like I've gone way too serious because I can't find a way to levy out my emotions around these books because they mean a great deal to me. I love them so deeply. Yeah, it's too serious for me. That's the thing. You're in my shot. Anyway, that was a handful of my favorite books, talked about in a way where I hope was entertaining to you in some way, shape, or form. Dare I ask what your favorite book is? I feel like that's just such a loaded question. That's why I have 52 books. I feel like that's a good handful to have. I think the question I always ask in any Q&A, whenever a booktuber does this, is more so the question, what book has changed the way you see and move through the world? And all the books that I've mentioned have done that for me. I'm always looking for a book that might change the light in the day, the pace of the day, and how I might approach every new day differently. And I guess that's what I'm asking of you. If you have that book, let me know. Tell it to me. I love adding a book to my never-ending TBR. As always, I'm a Blackwell's affiliate. Blackwell's offers free shipping, which I absolutely love. I also use it to get books to Asia because I love free shipping. Yeah, I also have a novella out, Adolescence Leaves, maps loss, memory, trauma in between Los Angeles and Tokyo. So if you enjoy me, I think you'd enjoy the book, also linked downstairs. As always, be well, do good work, keep in touch.